welcome to I Love This Thing So Fricking Much, a podcast about passion. My name is Sophie Katz, and today I am joined by Mike Hodge, a comedy and musical theater writer and Cheez-It sommelier. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hi, Sophie. How's it going?
Going great! So, here's how this works. Mike will have 3 minutes to talk about something that he loves. This can be a person, place, thing, concept, activity, anything he wants. Our only requirement is that he loves it wholeheartedly and wants to tell us why. Are you ready, Mike?
I think I am, yeah.
Good. Got my timer here. Now, what do you love so fricking much?
Sophie, I love old Hollywood cartoons so much, specifically of the 1940s. So I love comedy, and I've dedicated my life to writing and making comedy with varying levels of success. But I'm pretty sure 40s Hollywood cartoons taught me everything I know about comedy. I'm talking about stuff from MGM, Fleischer, Universal, Disney, Columbia, and most of all, Warner Brothers. In fact, I'm pretty positive the first non-peekaboo content that made me laugh was a Daffy Duck cartoon. And going back and looking at this stuff, it all makes sense. Like, these are things that are very simple. It's usually one character trying to eat or murder another character, and that first character gets blown up a lot. It's a pretty winning formula that any kid can get. Of course, viewing these things as an adult, you realize that these simple cavalcades of violent mayhem are also littered with endless artistry, expert timing, forgotten celebrity references, and oh so much innuendo. It will shock you how many bad guys are instantly horny for Bug Bunny and obvious drag. But as I moved to Hollywood as an adult, I found myself attending screenings of these shorts as they were originally meant to be seen, which is on a giant theater screen in front of a laughing audience. And living down the road from the studios where these things were made, I started to dig more into them and learned a lot about who made them and kind of what made them so consistently great. But I chose the 40s specifically, and you might be thinking, why, you nerd? The theatrical cartoon had developed through the 30s thanks to like Disney and kind of bringing the artistry and the form to what it could be. But in the 40s, everyone in the other studios had kind of stopped trying to imitate Disney, and they focused on making cartoons that were actually funny, adding wise-ass characters, incredible speed, fourth wall breaks, and lots of cartoon violence. These were drunk animators trying to make each other laugh to pass the day, and kids weren't really registered as a priority. If you don't know who Tex Avery is, he's the reason old cartoons went from cute to unhinged really fast. 1940 was also the year Bugs Bunny, Woody Woodpecker, and Tom and Jerry were created, along with countless other iconic cartoons joining them that same decade. So it's no coincidence that the 40s were when both Looney Tunes and MGM shorts hit their absolute peak. Disney shorts even got funny too, because Walt was paying less attention to them. Then World War II came, and these things gave an indomitable anti-authoritarian spirit to the whole theater-going experience. It becomes more obvious when you see Daffy Duck hitting Hitler on the head with a mallet, of course, but there's a modern spirit and sensibility that still resonates today. And Hollywood shorts in the 40s also still had actual budgets, which means the animation, the backgrounds, the color, everything is gorgeous. Watch a Bob Clampett Looney Tune and try to imagine something with that much explosive energy on a limited animation budget. This all got cut when TV came around because people were just not going to the theater enough anymore.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, it's 3 minutes. Yeah, so these were made by some of our greatest American filmmakers, and you should go watch them right now.
That's great. Thank you for telling us about 1940s Hollywood cartoons today.
Yeah, of course. I love talking about this stuff.
Something that you mentioned early on is that a lot of these cartoons have that same formula of one character is trying to kill another character, but they're failing at it. Talk a little more about that formula. I mean, why does that work?
I think it's a general sort of underdog kind of appeal. Anytime there's, an antagonist, it's either a big burly guy, somebody with weapons, somebody with a gun, a predator in a nature animal situation, a coyote hunting a roadrunner, a cat hunting a mouse, anything like that, where it's these forces of nature and forces of life that are constantly out to get you, and you don't need to be as necessarily burly or strong to win. Wits are enough. Humiliating, really dumb characters is enough. It just is something that I think is always going to be funny. It's punching up from a humor standpoint every single time. And to me, that's kind of the very basics of comedy. There's no limit to how that can be explored. And as long as you're sticking with that basic formula, I think you're starting from a good point. And it's up to the artist, the writers, the director of what to do within that arena. Because it's obviously been done hundreds, thousands of times, but it never gets stale.
Talking about that idea of punching up, it seems to me it makes a lot of sense that these cartoons, when the world went to war, these cartoons also went to war and would lampoon these dangers, these scary figures in life like Hitler. We're going to punch up at Hitler and maybe infuse an extra sense of optimism that, hey, maybe we will win this war that's going on forever. Just like how we know Roadrunner is never going to get eaten by the coyote,
Right, right,
because
exactly.
then the story would be over.
Yeah, it's something that you don't even notice as a kid, obviously, because they're just not every cartoon was made during that period specifically as a propaganda piece, but there are elements in almost all of them that reference what's going on in the world. And, you know, there are some cartoons featuring gremlins dismantling a plane that Hitler is flying, and that's the joke and that's the gag. But then the first Tweety Bird cartoon ever made features references to a victory garden and a reference to turning out lights at the end at a curfew to save power, you know, for wartime. It's just all these things you're like, oh, that's a little weird as a kid. It's silly, so I'm laughing at it. But you grow up and you're like, oh, this has grounds in reality and was pointing to something that was going on in the world and was on everybody's mind. So there's something very cathartic about that too, I think. There are Bugs Bunny cartoons where it's a normal setup. You know, there's one called Super Rabbit. It's a parody of Superman, which was also, you know, the Fleischers were doing those cartoons at the time. And it's a normal good guy versus bad guy kind of cartoon the whole time. And it ends with Bugs just saying, sorry, guys, I got more important work to do. And he's in a Marines outfit or a naval outfit and just marches off toward, you know, Germany and points east or something. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess this was made in 1943. And sure enough, it was. So you can trace a lot of what was going on in America through these things.
Yeah, I think cartoons have this justifiable reputation as being so wacky and out of this world, but it sounds like some of the charm of these cartoons is that they always had a foot in the real world.
And a lot of that is down to just knowing that people were going to see these things once in a theater and then never again. It made sense to make them topical and made sense to kind of keep the current state of the world in mind. And a lot of that's with the celebrity references I mentioned that would have been on everybody's mind back then. You know, a Lauren Bacall reference, Laurel and Hardy reference. You know, there are so many characters based on these radio personalities and vaudeville personalities that no one really knows anymore. But they know the character they were based on to this day. You look at somebody like Foghorn Leghorn. That is a character who is in the pop culture, but it's based on like two different radio characters who were very obscure, and you have to really have been alive at the time to even get the joke, but it took on a life of its own. It's just things like that that I find fascinating too, where there was this culture going on then that obviously it's not as the media ecosystem now is unlike anything obviously that's come before, but especially then it's a very much like you were there's a radio show on this time of day, you listened to it or you missed it, that was it, and there was no TV and you went to the theater for things, and maybe there were books and comics and things like that to entertain you otherwise. But through these things that have endured, it's kind of like a little time capsule and a little message from the past that's preserved for us now that you can look at and go, oh, I guess these are little references, these are little things from 1945 or whatever that were going on that we otherwise would have no idea about or wouldn't be thinking about.
You mentioned before that the animators were just trying to make each other laugh when they made these cartoons. It sounds like they weren't thinking at all about the longevity of this. Will this specific short continue to make us money a decade from now? They're just making something for the moment. And it sounds like in doing so, they created something oddly eternal.
Yeah, and that's why it's very tough to reboot this stuff. These characters, they're IP now. And at the time, yeah, they weren't gonna make money off of these going forward. You know, the studios owned the characters. If you created a character at one of the studios, you got no money from that character for the rest of your life. You had to keep working or, you know, make new shorts starring the characters or new art that you sold or something like that later in life. I know a lot of those guys did that. But yeah, it was all very sort of fleeting. And so it behooved them to stay interested to just make each other laugh and keep it interesting for themselves because they weren't getting paid a lot. And there was no promise of any longevity that no one knew TV was coming. And TV is really the reason any of this stuff endured. And anybody is still talking about this stuff. The reason I think a lot of us saw this stuff was the fact that it was easy programming for a lot of networks back, you know, especially in the 80s and 90s, because a lot of Turner networks owned a lot of the 40s catalogs for these studios. And ABC and Nickelodeon had a lot of the 50s and beyond catalogs. So you saw more of like the classic sort of Space Jammy looking Looney Tunes cartoons on ABC and some of those more streamlined designs, a little less wacky, a little less wild because the budgets were smaller. They're still great, but it's just a very different thing. It's a big message in like just making something for the sake of it instead of success or money, which I think we could all take.
Is there anything that you don't like about 1940s Hollywood cartoons? And if so, how do you handle that?
Oh my God. Okay. As you might imagine, the sensibilities from the 40s are a little different than they are now, especially when it comes to races and cultures and things like that. And especially when you add World War II into that mix, and there are some very, very ugly shorts mixed in there. You know, there are pretty clean shorts that will end with a blackface gag or a Japanese gag or something like that. But then there are ones that are built around these kind of distasteful designs. And I would say there's nothing overtly malicious about most of it, except for World War II era Japan type cartoons. Those are like the worst of the worst. Not that they're going to be in a viewing rotation for anybody normally these days, but if you're going through them all or you're really doing deep research, you will stumble upon them, and it's pretty gross. It's important to see. Obviously, it's important for historical context, but that's something I can easily say like, no thanks, not a huge fan there.
It just goes to show when you are creating something that is for the moment, the world's always moving on. We're always learning that, hey, what we thought was funny, what we thought was just a laugh is actually harmful. Those things are going to wind up left behind.
And there's no way to tell in the moment, but it's still out there. It's still a part of it. And I think history is important to use as a point forward and to learn from. But it can be ugly, and that goes for so many different things about our world. But here, in something that is tied so much into entertainment, thought to be for children, adds a little thing. And everybody was doing it. It's not like it was one studio or one creator or anything. It was just the way it was, sadly.
Do you think there are things that current day comedians and comedy writers can learn from that? Oh, these stories, a lot of the humor is in punching up. And here are some instances where now we know, oh, this wasn't punching up, this was punching down.
Yeah.
Can we use that as ways to help us craft things that maybe will last longer?
Well, I think unfortunately there's a bit too much of punching down going on, and that being sort of as like a big revolution. Like, oh yeah, wait, we can punch down. This is great. This is awesome. I feel so powerful. But it's all digital. It's all kind of not face to face, and it's all fairly anonymous, or at least more of it is, which is kind of the slippery slope there. So you have, I think, groups of people who have just become accustomed to punching down humor, which from the outside, if you're looking in on that, it just feels so ugly. And I think it's just a dangerous thing in general, but it's also bad for comedy. It is not, it is teaching so many people that the formula for comedy is kind of an inverse of what it should be. I do think there are still some great punching up comedy out there, and it will never stop. I mean, it's just the natural way to do it. But I also think that there's a lot of people punching down who think they're punching up. That's kind of a weird thing too, where they've convinced themselves that the ones who are in power, the ones who are mean and big, are the vulnerable among us, which is a whole different topic and a whole different, deeper issue. So I think the answer there is, yeah, everybody should just watch some Looney Tunes and kind of recalibrate their thinking and how we think of the world. It is more complicated than that, of course, but I think just the muddling of what constitutes punching up and punching down is really the issue there.
And who knows, 80 years from now, someone might be sitting on a podcast and talking about the humor of the 2020s.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Or lack thereof,
Mike, thank you so much for telling us about something you love today.
Of course, anytime.
And thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today. If you would like to learn more about 1940s Hollywood cartoons or our guest Mike, you can find his social media information in the episode description, including a link to his in-development theme park musical, Doofyland. And if you have something you love so freaking much you want to tell me all about it, consider this your invitation to join the show. I Love This Thing So Freaking Much is a production of Through the Window Media. This episode was directed and edited by Sophie A. Katz. You can find us at Through the Window on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Tumblr. That is THROU The Window at all those social media sites. Be good to yourself, be kind to each other, and you'll hear from us again soon.